It literally sounds like you're in prison. It's amazing because, of course, this is a hospital that's supposed to be there to help you recover. So I'm now curious, how did you meet?
Well, we met in a mental hospital.
Sort of.
And that it progressed into something intimate.
Like, I don't know what I would have done if, like, we dated and then broke up and, like, didn't talk. No.
Right, yeah.
But you're still doing this podcast. You're doing something that's very important for the world.
We fall down, but we get up.
Welcome back to the Hometown Friends podcast, where we hear the friendship stories that define our lives. My guests today are Lucia and Celia, who are young Bay Area natives and ex-girlfriends who host the podcast called How Did You Meet? These women started their podcast to share their story of meeting in an eating disorder recovery facility, and they forged a deep friendship while in treatment in a mental institution. And together, they experienced the challenges and the irony of the treatment and rehabilitation that was offered to them in these mental health facilities. Through this friendship, they found support, love, and intimacy that led to a romantic partnership and then a breakup. But they continued to host the podcast together, where they share honest discussions about sex, drugs, eating disorders, and the reflections on coming of age. Lucia also creates unique cover art for each episode. So please enjoy this discussion with a pair of authentic friends and fellow podcasters. And don't forget to follow and subscribe this podcast and share it with your friends. Lucia and Celia, welcome to the Hometown Friends podcast.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
We're so happy to have you. I'm so glad you agreed to come on the podcast. Let's start by asking, how did you guys meet?
Well, we met in a mental hospital.
Sort of. Eating disorder rehab facility just has, like, less of a ring to it, you know?
Yeah.
And requires more background and explanation. And I feel like mental hospital is more, catchy.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's a very unique situation, although maybe not so unique.
I think specifically an eating disorder is so confusing to a lot of people because it's like a mental illness where you don't really want to get better. And I think to anyone who hasn't experienced it, it makes no sense, like, why you're being told you're, like, making yourself very unhealthy, like, you're destroying your body, and then you're like, oh no, but I want to stay that way. Because most people who are sick in some way, like, want to get better. Now, looking back, have more context on, like, what was going on with me at the time. I also now know I was, like, undiagnosed bipolar at the time. I was just, like, working through a lot of, like, past stuff, also starving myself. So very unstable place to be in. So my mom had taken me to a doctor, like, to discuss all of that. And they suggested that I needed to be either, like, in some kind of very rigorous program or suggested the mental hospital. And I was like, that freaked me out. I was very, like, someone that did not like to be confined or told what to do. And, like, I felt very trapped, even though looking back, like, I don't think I was, but I just, like, felt very trapped and, like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. So I actually messaged a girl I had been talking to on some chat sites, because I was on all these, like, online chat sites, Kick, with just other, like, mentally unwell teenagers. Not a good place to be if you're, like, already struggling. It's like an echo chamber of bad ideas, basically. I did find some comfort in it at the time, and I think it wasn't healthy, but no matter what, it's nice to connect with people that, I mean, this is what your podcast is all about. Like, in any state, it's nice to connect to people that understand you.
Totally. Thank you for saying that, because I think that's exactly right. So at the time, you felt like these people were supporting you. And when you look back on it, you realize they actually weren't the best support. You needed actually something different.
I messaged, I think, in that group chat and said, like, oh, my mom is trying to send me away to mental hospital. And I said, like, I'm going to run away from home. And then this girl was like, oh, I'll go with you a couple days later. And I like thought I was like changing my hair to make myself look different. I literally just straightened my hair and looked exactly the same. Packed a bag of stuff. We left at like 3 a.m., got on a bus to LA.
You got on this bus with this girl and you guys went pretty far down south. And then there was like the bus driver said like, we're breaking down. We have to change the tire or something.
Yeah, so they said they had to change the tire. This was in Burbank. And they said everyone stay on the bus, which doesn't really make sense, but they were very adamant that everyone needed to stay on the bus. And I saw police cars outside, and even then, I did not think it was about me. Like, I was so confident. I was like, no one knows where I am. I didn't realize until the police were literally on the bus and I heard my name. And I was like, oh my God. Like, they're looking for me. And then one of them came up to me and asked, like, are you Celia Fredman? And I was like, no. Like, so confidently, like, no, I'm not. They were like, what's your name? And I said a random name. I think I said Amber Hill. I don't know where I came up with that name, but I was like, oh, that's gonna be like my alias. They're like, okay, so we have this picture of you and we're pretty sure this is you, so you have to come with us.
Well, you were running away, and in fact, you felt like you were, well, maybe like all young people, they feel like they're invincible at certain times, and you were getting away from something you thought was not in your best interest. But then you got caught, and then you got returned to your parents, and your mom came and got you, yeah?
So, like, I'm really lucky that my mom was, like, able and willing to just, like, get on the next flight and get me. My aunt came with her, too. And in a way, like, I think I felt kind of happy when she came and got me. Like, I would never have admitted it, but I felt kind of good. I was like, okay, I'm going home, you know? And I was like, I don't know, me and my mom felt like a little closer than we had before. And then the next day, she was like, okay, so you're going to the hospital.
So there was both relief, but also then you were back in what you were trying to escape from. Yeah, which was the reality that you needed some intensive care. You were going through something that really needed attention. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think personally, I wouldn't suggest that hospital to anyone. Like, the place Lucia and I met, I thought was helpful in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think I improved or that it helped at all, really. It was like, and I don't think many people there did. It was more of like, it was more meant for a 72-hour hold. But then they kept me for almost a month. I know that my mom was actually trying to get me out and didn't realize, like, all of the, I guess, like, hoops she would have to jump through, and the fact that, like, if you try to take someone out before the doctor says they can go, then, like, you have to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to Lucia and how Lucia's story about how you got the treatment that you needed. And then, yeah, what's your story, Lucia? Because I know it's different.
So we had the same, like, if you looked on paper, like very similar health issues where like our body was starving and causing the same havoc of like a low heart rate and like low bone density, feeling lightheaded, not able to do anything. The family conflict is also relatable, like the eating disorder sort of causing a lot of conflict once someone knows that it exists. So mine, Celia said hers started like probably like a year and a half before. Mine started probably more like 3 or even 4 years before, but it was very slow. It was like a step at a time. So that also allowed everyone around me to acclimate with me. So it wasn't alarming to anyone in my life by the stage that it was actually harmful to me because it had been so gradual. In middle school, some person who was not qualified, like she was like someone's mother, came and gave a detailed health talk to my class in like 7th grade. And I think a lot of problems with schools teaching nutrition is that it's assuming that everybody is going to have diabetes and is on the track to obesity, when really that same age group is most vulnerable for eating disorders. You know, nobody was talking about fueling my body. It was more what not to eat. Like that was the main focus. And so from there, I just, with very, again, good intentions, started to just limit my sugar intake, you know, because she had this huge visual demonstration of sugar. And so sugar was my first, like in eating disorders, it's called a fear food, where there's certain
Mm.
foods that cause more anxiety and like true fear, like fight or flight, than other foods. I knew at a certain point I was being illogical. Like I knew that I had stepped away from this original intention of health and it was going into a different place that I knew on some level I was full of shit, but I couldn't stop. It was caught only because I went on a 3-week family vacation. Then they sort of started linking like my physical characteristics when I think previously they maybe thought I was growing, or they weren't super concerned or startled because again it had been so slow that I was slowly losing weight, to now seeing me eating, they could, I think, way more clearly connect like, oh, the reason why like her knees are sticking out of her legs is because she's eating fruit only.
Right.
That was the red
Yeah.
flag. And so then my mom, with again great intentions, just decided to take me to a nutritionist. This woman obviously had that perception, and she also was talking to me like a normal person, which I was not
Mm.
at that point.
Mm.
So would like I would eat like 4 bananas a day, you know, which, you know, not great. But then her approach to that was saying like, you know, bananas have a lot of sugar.
Oh,
And
right.
bananas had been my safe haven food for like years. Like
They were they were actually fueling you. They were
they
giving you the
were
sugar that your body needed.
I was just slowly like shutting down throughout this meeting. I think it was only an hour, but like deteriorating throughout because like she was taking my safe little philosophy where I thought I had eliminated all the bad foods and had this precious little bubble of foods that were safe and I could only eat them. And she was like totally ripping apart my like the rug I was standing on. And
Totally.
I went home and just had like a breakdown where I was just sobbing and like rocking back and forth and like saying no food is safe. And so then my mom was even more like, what?
There's this anxiety that you had, which was what's safe and what's not. And you were very concerned about what's safe and what's not.
Finally, my parents, like my mom actually took me to a doctor.
Wow.
So at that point, still, I think nobody in my family understood how deep in it I was. And one of the first things that they did was they just suggested maybe we take away the scale. And that's very, you know, very simple request. And I like jolted up and like my eyes got big and I like looked at my mom and we both kind of started laughing because she was also really surprised by my physical response. And then I just started sobbing. The idea of them taking it away was that is when, like how Celia was saying, like she said she felt trapped. I felt like my thoughts were like I was under attack. Like I felt like I was under
Yeah.
attack, like I wasn't safe. And like from that point on, like it was when my parents got involved, like they did take away the scale and like I lost my shit. You know, like I was screaming in the house, I was throwing things, like I was so full of rage. From then on, my parents knew and like eyes were on me about what I was eating. They sat with me for every meal. They brought me food at school and like made me eat lunch with them. Like, and it was just like I had previously had like an amazing relationship with my parents and now I was like a monster. Like I was someone I had never met. Literally,
Wow.
one of my things was I would scream and slam the door and like open and close and slam it over and over. Like I had so much crazy rage and anger
Mm.
and like I like went crazy sort of for like 2 weeks until the doctor was like, you've lost weight, you know, since this diagnosis, at like trying to do this at home. and it got to the point where my heart rate was too low. And so then I was hospitalized. So not institutionalized, but like just sent to like a medical hospital to be like
Gotcha.
hooked up for like 24/7 for like a few days. Somehow, because it was liquid, because I was in a medical facility, like I just was drinking Boost for that whole time. And I think it made everyone around me pretty optimistic that I just had to go through this breakdown. Now I was hospitalized and now I'm on board. But for some reason, it was just the hospital. And I was put in an outpatient program. So personally,
Okay.
I think my recovery would have been a lot shorter if I just from the hospital went to the rehab where me and Celia met. But they,
Okay.
I think, thought that they were doing me a favor by letting me try outpatient. So I would still live at
Right.
home. I would go to school. And just after school, I would have group therapy with these girls and we would eat around each other.
Yeah. So I'm now curious. How did you meet?
So that is the tagline of our podcast. We have a podcast called How Did You Meet?
Perfect.
And we say sort of because we actually met in an eating disorder recovery facility that we went to after both of us were in some kind of mental hospital. So we do know the difference. Like we've kind of experienced both. I went to this residential place and it was actually so much nicer. We were in this beautiful house. We got to take
Nice.
walks every day. There was a garden. We had garden therapy. We had equine therapy every few weeks.
Equine therapy.
Nice. That's awesome.
But it was just a much nicer facility. Like I had been in a hospital where it's like the thick glass windows and like you get your blood drawn like while you're sleeping at 6 a.m. and you get like strip searched. Like it was so intense and you get to go outside like once every 3 days onto their little balcony. That when I got there, it was like, oh, it's just like me and 2 other people when I started. And then a few weeks later, Lucia came. And I remember like my first impression was I thought she was pretty and I thought she looked so pissed. Like, because she walked in, she was so mad to be there. So I was like, oh, this girl hates it here. And that's like, yeah, that's what I remember. Like, first thing I thought when I saw you.
Lucia, tell us how you met.
So that first day when Celia met me was my arrival day. And the arrival day is obviously very stressful because you know you're moving in. And it's all new people. They let you arrive with your parents, but then they separate you for several hours from your parents. And I'm like, am I gonna get to say goodbye? Like, did they just take them away and take away the goodbye? Like, where is my mom? So that was also very stressful. And then also my first day, it was a little unusual or awkward because someone there was leaving. And so that was also kind of weird of them going through these rituals of the goodbye process. And she had to like, there was a song that she chose. And I just was like, I don't even know what's happening right now, you know? And then one of the therapists was like, kind of accusing me of being bitchy. And I was like, dude, I literally just don't know what's going on right now. You know,
Sure.
like,
Yeah. You're
I
just getting
don't,
integrated into this and you're
yeah.
seeing the whole process right in front of you, sort of very confusing. Do you remember when you saw Celia and what you thought of her?
So it is a house. So I was sitting in like the foyer type thing and I was like cold and upset. And so I was like, had my arms crossed. And then Celia and like the other girls had to walk past me. They were like getting weighed or something, like some morning ritual where they had to walk in a row like little ducks. And like they walked by. And I don't remember anyone else, but Celia like turned and like waved to me. But I don't think me and Celia actually got close or even maybe even spoke one on one until we had, which I don't think was until the next day, like our first group therapy session.
The group therapy.
And so we all have to like walk outside together and you know we all sit in this kind of like U-shaped couch and everybody has to, you know, talk about how they're doing, and it's hosted by this therapist. And this one girl we were with was having a really hard time and was like rocking back and forth and like sobbing. And later on the way out, I was like, Celia, like, is she okay? You know, like, what happened? And she's like, she does that every time. And that was when I was like, oh, like that's where, like, because like I was like tripping the whole time of like, what the hell is happening? And then Celia was totally like on my page of like, she literally does that every single time. She's fine. You know, where like I had kind of thought that Celia and her were close friends. And really it was like, oh no, we're all just happen to be living here and like nobody's that tight. I feel like that's when we first like actually started like talking or choosing to sit next to each other on the couch. Like there was so much downtime. So like I think we really bonded over the downtime.
One of the things that sticks out for me about this story, Lucia, is that Celia made an effort to say hi. You know, she very simple. She just waved to you and smiled in even a low key smile, but but just was kind in a moment when she was trying to connect with you. And I think it's emblematic of how friendships start in these very simple ways. That there was an offering, you know, an offering of kindness and an offering of connection. And that paved the way for you guys to become friends.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember it. I think that that's like, sure, like I can say like it was super casual and like she didn't open her mouth. Like it was a no teeth smile and like it was very brief, obviously. Like she was walking by, but like that was like, how long ago was that, Celia? Like 7 years?
It's like 8 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, but I remember it. So like
it was
obviously you're right.
2016.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. That moment was really important to you. And I think it is, again, it's emblematic of how these little steps become bigger relationships, right? Just little ways of saying hi to someone opens up our willingness to actually go the next time we're in, you know, connection with each other, around each other, that we might speak to each other.
Like going back to the idea that our emotions and opinions were irrelevant is that they didn't want me and Celia to be friends. And I understand from a certain extent, and I've heard this with other mental health rehabs or addiction rehabs, is that sometimes friendship, when there's an addiction, and sometimes an eating disorder can feel like an addiction, that two people can actually make each other worse. Right. So if I went in there saying, Celia, like I have all the ideas of manipulation, let's flush our food down the toilet, let's, you know, throw stuff out the windows. When we get out, I'll show you how to exercise harder. Like, right. So I understand that there could be a flaw there, right, with turning to a peer for support. At one point, me and Celia had a conflict.
Right.
But I was very emotional and I was telling this therapist, I really just want to talk to Celia and clear this up. Because had I done that, I would have found out that I completely misunderstood the situation and Celia was actually being totally my friend and was like, I misunderstood. But I was crying to them and saying, I just want to talk to Celia. Like, can we have her come in here and I can just talk to her right now? Because the only time I was with her was in these public spaces where this third party was there.
Okay.
Only in group therapy, you know, when we're all together, that wasn't a time for me to privately address her. So I was crying to them saying, I just want to talk to her, you know, and they were like, you shouldn't depend on her like for recovery. That's not what she's there for.
Right.
That's what we're here for. You
But
know,
you
you
were
should
trying-
talk to your therapist.
Yeah, you were trying to resolve a conflict with your friend. That was something that you really needed to get actual information about something that was causing you pain, right? You're thinking something, you were making something up in your head, and you needed to resolve it. You needed to have direct communication with your friend.
Well, and I was saying I find support in her, you know, like I I feel like I need this, you know, and I find her helping me. Like I was saying those words and they were saying like I was wrong,
Gotcha.
basically. And that
Wow.
though I feel that way, I shouldn't feel that way. And I should actually change my perspective and not lean on her at all. And like Celia was saying, like I felt like our friendship was so valuable in that space. And just looking at it from their perspective, we were both eating all of our food, right? So that's
Uh-huh.
another thing where I'm like, it's clear that we're both on board right now, you know,
Gotcha.
or that it's clear that, you know, I'm on board at least. And if Celia's not on board, it's not impacting me. Yeah, like that's, I think, another element that was incredibly frustrating is that our emotions were disregarded because of the eating disorder. My opinion, and like it's true, you know, that I did find support in having a buddy in this crazy environment where we had no rights, you know, constantly our opinions and experiences were being disregarded or like not taken seriously.
And you said that your relationship with Lucia really did help, that this friendship was an essential piece of your recovery.
Yeah, it was like a big part of it, honestly. And I remember a specific instance where Lucia and I were talking about just like about our relationships with our parents and everything that was going on, what we were going to do after. And I said something that I thought that I should do. And she said, well, but then how would you get better? And that was like a weird turning point for me because it was like the realization that she was actually thought it was a good thing to recover. And I had never considered that because, like I said, I was so stuck in my stubbornness of like, oh, it's a bad thing because I'm being told I have to.
Right.
So I had never considered that it might be actually a good thing for me. And like she kind of opened my mind to that. And I do think that made a big difference.
What a beautiful example of what a friend is, right? What a friendship can do for us, which is to, even though we're stuck in these modes of thinking, but to expose us to a new way of thinking and actually care about you more than almost you care about yourself in some ways. Like there's something really beautiful about that statement of like joining you and like and encouraging you and influencing you to be better.
Then like a few years later, that's when I would say got a lot closer. And then that's also when we started dating. But even before we started dating, we were like, we called it where it's like we're dating. Like that was a whole thing too. It took a long time.
That
to
was an
actually get to the
era.
point of being like, yeah, like let's actually be together because
We were acting like we were dating before we were dating. And like we even embarrassingly talked about platonic marriage. Like we wanted to hang out all the time. I said I wasn't gay, but like I felt this deep like soulmate connection. And I do think friends can be soulmates. Like I do believe that. And yeah, but I was like, oh, but I'm not gay, you know, and I wouldn't actually like
no
want
homo.
to. Yeah, like, oh, I want to marry you, but like not gay. And
Yeah.
then I was
And I would always be
actually,
like, I know you're gay.
yeah, she would always say, and I would be like offended, you know, she'd be like, I think you're more gay
Yeah.
than you think. And I was like, oh, like Celia's bullying me, you know. And then it was
I was right, by the
actually
way.
after college, I did field work. So I left, I was like getting ready to leave for like a year to live in Costa Rica and study monkeys. And this had like been a thing. So she knew that it was going to happen. And the day we said goodbye, this to me was like my red flag, or like not red flag, but like, oh, you know, is that our goodbye was so emotional that it felt like a breakup. Like the level of like sobbing and crying and like not being able to speak was like felt like a breakup.
The
Like
thought of
crying and
having
like
not having her with you really brought it very
yeah.
center to the idea that you loved her.
Yeah, like I think
Yeah.
it just made me realize that like it wasn't just a friendship, or like it wasn't like my other friendships at the very least. And I think that night maybe Celia was like, have you ever thought about like actually dating? You know, like we talk about
Yeah.
platonically dating and like whatever, but have you ever thought about like whatever? And I said, like, I don't think that I like girls, but I could date Celia. Like that's how I started to kind of like introduce the idea of like I don't have to call it a label. Like I don't have to identify as bisexual or lesbian or whatever, but I can just know that like I love Celia. And I think that also made me a lot more open-minded of like I don't have to feel like I'm changing my entire identity or like I didn't know something about myself when like I've always known that I love Celia, you know, and like now I can just like do it in like a different way. And so like now I would say I'm bisexual, but for a long time I would just like when I told my mom that we were dating, I didn't say like, hey, I'm bi or hey, like I like girls. Like I was just like, I'm dating Celia and I want you to know that I'm dating Celia and that's all. You know,
Yeah.
and like I think that was a little weird for her, but like that's how I was able to kind of like start like considering, like I feel like it would have taken a lot longer had I needed to go the whole route of like my identity and like what is like, do I feel this way in general, you know, like about who, and like instead I could just sort of skip that whole part and be like, oh, I can date a woman and that can be like, it can be about the person, you know,
Yeah.
like
That's amazing.
and so that's
yeah.
how we started dating.
I love it. I love that there's a sort of a progression of identification, right? That we don't have to define ourselves, whether it's our sexuality, but that actually what attracted you was each other's friendship, and that you started as a very deep friendship, and that it progressed into something intimate, and that was a good time for you. And now I know that you, because you say this on your podcast, I know you went through that time, and now you're not necessarily right. You're not together right now,
No.
but you're
Right.
but you're
Yeah.
still doing this podcast.
I think the podcast was just an idea for a really long time. We'd have a couple of really old recordings where we were even trying aliases.
At one point, we talked about doing it anonymously.
Yeah,
Because-
thinking,
Yeah.
anonymously, we don't want everybody to know. Like we had fake names and we like, yeah, we worked on the name for a while. We're like, what should we call it? You know? And so, yeah, it was slow for a while actually.
Well, did you have a sense of like you wanted to do something with this, or you just wanted to tell stories about it and sort of have fun with it?
So we had recorded just like episodes here and there. And then once we were together, we were like, why don't we just do it? You know, like it had been so long since the recovery and everything that we weren't as embarrassed about it anymore. And we were like, why don't we just do the podcast? Like it would be fun. It's a interesting story of like how we met and now that we're dating. We didn't have a lot of like plans for direction of it, but it was when we started really rewarding like for a lot of people to say they resonated with it. And I think it gave me more of a sense of like why we actually want to do it, because it's really nice. I think we talked about not having for a while anyone who you could relate to except for like in not very healthy ways. And I think it is nice, like representation in all kinds of ways. Like just like seeing yourself in someone else is helpful and like makes you feel less alone. So I hope people get that from it. And it's also like we have so much fun. We like always, especially now that we're not together, like we catch up a lot doing that. And it's a nice way to stay connected.
I don't think it was my original or either of our original intentions to like help people. I think it was more like, this is like a pretty wild story, like living in this facility and like meeting, and then we dated, and like we thought it was so catchy that like that is how we met and now we're dating. And like people would still ask us, you know, like, how did you meet? And we're like, actually we have a podcast about it, you know, like, so it was
listen to
super
the pod,
fun, but,
you'll figure it out.
right. But then people did like you don't have to have gone to the extremes that me and Celia did in an eating disorder to need to be institutionalized against your will to find elements relatable. And that's like, the more I'm honest about it and the more I talk about it and the more I'm like, oh yeah, I met my ex-girlfriend because we both had eating disorders at the same time and like lived together for months, you know, like then people would pretty consistently come back and say, oh yeah, you know, like I also struggled with that. I think it's pretty a universal experience to have some type of unhealthy relationship with food that maybe wouldn't be categorized as a full-blown like diagnosed eating disorder,
Yeah.
but to have some type of conflict or some type of extra emotion tied to food, whether that's you're binging for comfort or you feel guilty about food or you have a interesting maybe unhealthy relationship with exercise. Like I think it's honestly like everybody has a little bit of that at some point in their life, or like you had an injury and you gained weight and now you feel some type of way because you gained weight and like you've never felt this way before. Pretty consistently, whoever I tell comes back with something.
You're doing something that's very important for the world, right? You're exposing this thing and talking about it freely and talking about yourselves and your relationship and how important that is to, you know, for everyone to listen to this podcast, especially if you're going through something like this, that, you know, that you can be their friends in a lot of ways. You can be the voice of reason. You can be the voice of health for these folks who are going through it, and millions of people are going through it. In fact, you know, one of the things that was super striking for me is listening to it and actually resonating with it myself when I never thought I had eating issues. But the truth is that our society really encourages all the things that you guys are talking about. I love the relationship, you know, and how you guys sort of show your relationship and play off each other throughout the podcast. What has this relationship meant to you as we wind down? What can you reflect on this relationship, and what have you sort of, what has it meant to you over these years?
You go first.
I mean, it almost like makes me emotional. I do feel like this is like the most like important relationship in my life because like we've been like in each other's lives for so long, but we've also been like at the worst, you know, like we literally like met each other when we were both at our worst. And like such like the conflict with parents, I feel like with our moms was like so hard and nobody got it. And like since then, like I do think Celia is my only friend that has that really special relationship with their mom. And turns out our moms actually connected prior to us being there.
Wow.
Through a common friend.
A mutual
And
friend.
No
yeah,
way.
we didn't know
they
that
knew each
until years
other and
later.
had been talking to each other. And my mom fought for me to go to this rehab and not the psych ward that Celia was at because of Celia's mom saying, do not send your daughter there.
They almost like created that situation where you were able to meet each other kind of randomly. Wow, that's
And they
synergy.
helped maintain the relationship afterwards because they were paranoid that we would be really upset and hurt, that they were also going and getting support through other people who were having the same experiences as they were. So they also became friends and found friendship.
That's so cool. That actually two deep and important friendships have come out of this experience.
And like the friendship part, for sure, like we've grown with each other as friends. I mean, like kind of growing up together and like having the different phases of high school and then like college and also dating. I feel like that has been like it didn't work out obviously, but it was like very like a relationship that I definitely learned the most from. Like the relationship didn't work out, but like that doesn't change like my love for Celia at all. And like there's nothing like I wouldn't feel comfortable talking to her about. And I feel like I'm like we say all the time, like I'm so thankful to be friends. You know, I'm so thankful that like after breaking up, we were still able to like I don't know what I would have done if like we dated and then broke up and like didn't talk. You know, like I think I would just not be okay for like
Lucia
years.
says
maybe.
on every birthday card to me, like, I'm so glad we went crazy at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, there's something very bonding about going crazy at the same time, it seems. And
totally.
And it also seems like you really admire each other, and that there's something that was more important about, you know, the relationship, the actual relationship, not your intimate relationship. Your intimate relationship was one part of your relationship, but that your friendship, your connection, your willingness to be for each other and with each other, and the friendship won out.
Something I love about like our relationship altogether is I do think like this like makes me want to cry too. Oh my God. But I think like we've been so many versions of ourselves together, and it was also really cool that one of them was like a first love, and and even like in our relationship, like when we lived together for about a year, and like that was like I felt so at home there, and like it's nice that even still like I feel very at home when I'm with Lucia, and like I feel like every like changing version of myself like I can be, and like it's fun, like it's fun watching each other grow up and like being there for so much of it.
I love it. Well, this podcast is all about whom we belong with and where we belong. And I find that this conversation with you guys has really articulated that you belong with each other, and that you met at a mental hospital, and that even in a place where, they were controlling you and giving you all these sort of very draconian kinds of experiences, but also really trying to help you, you felt a connection to that place and with each other. And I would just want to thank you guys for coming on this podcast and sharing your story. And why don't you just end by telling everybody where they can find your podcast and what the next steps for you guys are.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so our podcast is called How Did You Meet? You can find us also. So we're on Spotify right now. We're only on Spotify. And then we have an Instagram called How Did You Meet?
Pod.
Lucia, do you know it?
I think
How Did You Meet Pod? Yeah, it's How Did You Meet Pod.
Lucia does this amazing cover art. So each episode has a new, unique art form, and it's beautiful. It's just great. The podcast is amazing. Follow these guys on Instagram. Check them out on Spotify, and let them know. And I'm a super fan of you guys' podcast.
Thanks
so
Chandler.
much.
Yeah, I'm a fan of your podcast too. It's like always very feel good stories listening to them.
Awesome. Well,
I really like what you're doing.
I'm glad to be a collaborator. Okay, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this interview. According to the National Eating Disorder Association, approximately 29 million Americans will suffer from eating disorders in their lifetimes. And the prevalence of eating disorders worldwide has grown exponentially over the last 25 years. Shockingly, eating disorders, specifically anorexia and bulimia, have the second highest mortality rate of any psychiatric illness besides opioid addiction, and millions of children and teens suffer from this deadly disease every year. Body dysmorphia and the anxiety and depression that comes from this extreme self-criticism is on the rise in all gender cohorts. And as a person who struggled with obesity for many years as a child and adolescent, I really resonated with how Lucia and Celia described how this disease began taking over their entire life and led to many negative emotional experiences and lots of conflicts with their family. The friendships that these women forged throughout the adversity of the experiences of being hospitalized against their will, and then the progression of supporting each other through the recovery process, is a wonderful mural of friendship. Through these experiences and witnessing each other's growth, these friendships exemplify the special qualities of a valuable nature of long-lasting relationships that span over the years and change over time. Their mutual trust, commitment, and authentic admiration of each other is a hallmark of friendship, and their podcast audiences benefit from being witness to their honesty and vulnerability. These women model the personal growth that comes from the acceptance of themselves and their focus on supporting each other to live life with health and well-being. Having friendships that stand the test of time and go through the ups and downs, like those that get formed in adolescence and continue through adulthood, are the types of relationship that we can draw strength from and return to over and over again, and not only to provide us with companionship, but the identity of belonging with another. If you have a friendship story that you want to share, follow us on Instagram at Hometown Friends Pod. And please subscribe and share this podcast so that we can continue to produce more stories of friendships that define our lives. The episode was edited and produced by yours truly and Delaney Cavelli, and the title song is sung by Michael Marshall, aka Mike Meese.
We fall down, but we get up.